Hello and welcome back to the Legal Cheek podcast, sponsored by Simpson Thatcher, home of the private equity training contract. My name is Julia Szaniszlo, and I'm joined once again by Legal Cheek's publisher and director, Alex Aldridge. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. So, any aspiring solicitor who's been traversing the likes of LinkedIn or legal forums may be forgiven for thinking that we're living through pretty tough times for law grads, with fewer and TCs and entry-level grad jobs to go around. However, what we found is that not only does the data seem to be contradicting this, but it also seems to be pretty inconclusive. Despite all the fear-mongering around AI and job cuts, TC numbers have seemed pretty stable, with law firms across the pond even expanding their graduate schemes. So, what's going on with all of these directly contradictory stories? Why does it seem like there's no conclusive answer to the question of whether or not AI is going to take your job? So, we're going to bring you two contradictory stories today, which sort of showcase how hard it is to find a clear answer to this question. So on the one hand, we've had Latham Watkins, huge US headquartered firm, actually expanding their headcount over the pond for their summer associate scheme, which is sort of the summer vac scheme internship equivalent in the US. But on the other hand, we've had a Australian firm called MinterEllison, who's actually cut the number of young junior lawyers that they have in their ranks from around 100 to just 72. So why does it seem that everyone is doing something completely different? And why does it seem like there's no clear answer as to, what's going to happen to my job? Am I going to have one in the next couple of years? Alex?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is it's too early to tell what
Yeah.
the impact of AI is going to be on sort of junior white collar jobs in law firms. And so you're getting these kind of contradictory stories, and people are trying to attach stuff to the AI narrative. And no one really knows. There's been a lot of stuff in the media, general media, just about this kind of assumption that AI will lead to a big reduction in sort of junior white collar roles. But we have looked at the data at Legal Cheek, and it's certainly not showing up yet. We'll come to that in a second. But of those two stories you mentioned, Julia, Latham Watkins increasing its sort of basically US summer vac scheme, call it summer associate program, quite significantly. It's up from, I think it's up from about 120 to 180 or something. So that's like an elite global law firm whose practice is booming at the moment, and they need more lawyers. And I mean, whether that track, you don't know for sure if that tracks through, because essentially these summer associates, they're doing kind of extended work experience, extended pay for work experience over the summer. They haven't got jobs with the firm, but if they're hiring more of them, you can assume that they're going to increase the trainee numbers. And that comes amid a lot of increases in trainee numbers in London from US firms. So if you look at the numbers of the US firms in London, a lot are increasing numbers. Or, I mean, like Simpson Thatcher, sponsor of this podcast, launched a training contract. So that's where the growth is in the market at this sort of elite end. But then you've got another top firm, sort of quite a different profile. MinterEllison is one of the leading law firms in Australia, cutting their training contract numbers, I think by like a third, real big cut. And I think that they've sort of said that's a bit to do with AI. So they've kind of come out and said that you've got to be slightly careful with the kind of AI washing stuff. So I think all this stuff around AI at the moment does, I suppose what it's creating is an atmosphere of efficiency where people are interested in finding efficiencies. So if you hear like AI repeat enough, everyone sort of thinks as kind of running a business, you think, okay, oh, good, like everyone else finding these efficiencies, I should probably find some efficiencies. I mean, we've explored some. At Legal Cheek, we've looked at that. How can we be more efficient? And actually, some of the things that we found are not related to AI. It's just more broadly, there's actually some quite good automation you can do that doesn't involve AI, but the conversation around efficiency has helped us focus on those. And that's a kind of, that's probably one of the points of this, the kind of, well, healthy upsides of this AI obsession is, you know, in the West, productivity has been languishing over, well, since the financial crisis, really. So I get governments have been looking for ways to try to get people to improve their efficiency in their working, which leads to greater productivity. And so certainly governments wouldn't be trying to stop all this conversation about AI because they think, oh, this could have quite a positive effect. So, but then you've got also companies which need to make job cuts, and they, for whatever reason, they've needed to for a while. And what is it? There is a perfect excuse right now to make job cuts and do it in the name of AI. And it looks like you're being kind of progressive and embracing technology, and it's just some cover for some job cuts. I'm not saying that is the case for MinterEllison, but you've got to look at these things with a certain degree of skepticism. But I think the important point, and we do have some sort of facts and data to back this up, is that it remains too early to say, certainly for law firms operating in the UK, if AI is causing a reduction in training contract numbers. Because we did some research where we looked at the training contract numbers since sort of 2019 through to this research was done late 2025. We'll put some links to it and things. What it showed was currently training contract numbers, and this is like the top 100 firms in the UK, so like Magic Circle, US firms in London, international, blah 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 blah, and it showed that training contracts are currently, there's more of them at the moment than there were in 2019. There was a spike coming out of COVID when they went up, and then they've dropped back a little bit since then. But all of the fall is accounted for by the rise in solicitor apprenticeships, which kind of school leaver solicitor apprenticeships, which more firms have been offering. Still quite a small fall, because the rise in solicitor apprenticeships is, well, there's a lot of talk about it. The numbers are still quite small. So that kind of accounts for that adjustment. So, and then within that, you've got stuff like, so you've got some US firms, that's where as I said, that's where the growth is in the sort of UK training contract market. You've got the kind of bigger London-based international, which are kind of flattish. And then there are some reductions that we're seeing kind of more in the regional offices of national or international firms in the UK. That seems to be where there are some falls, and that could be related to AI, but it might not. But as I said, overall, the picture is kind of pretty flat, up on 2019, slight decline from sort of 2022. So that's why these stories are so confusing, and it's too early to say. But I was thinking about this stuff. So I thought, right, I want to try and understand this more. So I arranged a coffee with two trainees that I know. And one of them is at a big, I could probably say, like a big elite London-based global firm. And the other is at a more kind of specialist city, international firm, but smaller. And it was interesting because the one at the big global law firm kind of, I got a sense of, when you're working on these sort of big deals, a lot of it involves you're kind of, as a trainee, you're the kind of link person on these emails between, maybe it's the bank or private equity, and then some element of the deal, the project you're funding, whatever. And you're just every day and you have various ones of these deals that you're working on, and every day your job essentially is to nudge these deals a bit further forward. And whilst it's email based, but it's very nuanced what you're doing. It doesn't involve that much law, but there needs to be bits of research in here, but it's subtle. And just speaking to them, the trainee I know, I got a sense, and I was like, this stuff couldn't be done by an AI agent. Do you know what I mean? It's very subtle. It's not rocket science, but it requires a kind of good human brain just to as the most efficient way to deal with these things. And so, but you could look at that area and think, oh, that's not like a hard law area. It's kind of deals. It's going to be more vulnerable to automation. And actually, I suspect it's not. It's not to say that this individual couldn't use AI in other stuff, like maybe an internal presentation or something. But the fee earning stuff, and it's important to remember that junior lawyers are fee earners. Their time is charged out. That's the law firm business model. Was like, yeah, pretty. I get the sense that's pretty insulated from AI. Whereas the other person I spoke to, who's, as I said, a kind of slightly more specialist firm doing sort of what you'd say is kind of more complex legal work that requires your brain a bit more. Speaking to them, I was struck by actually some of these more complex legal tasks maybe can actually be done quite well by AI, which is certainly not the way that's not the way the narrative around AI has been for a while. It was always assumed it would be the other way around. There's fewer people that work in this. Actually, for trainees, a lot of trainee solicitors do the sort of less law-y kind of stuff. It is more the kind of nudging forward these deals. But where it is sort of harder law, maybe there is more scope for AI use, and that could affect trainee numbers in the area. But these areas tend to have fewer trainees. What's your sense, Julia, as someone coming into preparing their entry into the legal profession?
Well, I think because of the nature of what we do at Legal Cheek, you end up speaking to not just, trainees and junior lawyers, but a lot of people who are in charge of training those lawyers up. And I always ask them about AI because you sort of have to. And everyone parrots the same sorts of things. They're just like, oh, this just means that we're going to need to improve judgment. That's going to be the top priority when things get automated. Or people skills are going to need to be at the forefront of our minds because, AI can't replicate that sort of thing. But I think you're right in that, people haven't really described what that really means. And this sort of very delicate push and pull, which can happen when you're working on a deal where there's lots of people's interests at stake. And it isn't just a matter of doing the technical work and pushing it through in one big block. It's like a very, it's a delicate process of negotiation, which, people's egos can get bruised. And I think that sort of work, which lawyers need to be very, very good at, can only really be done by someone who's human. And I think another element of this conversation that I find quite not worrying, but I think worth bearing in mind is that in order to develop all of these, skills of judgment, which are so people-based, you need to work for a while and you need to develop those skills for a while. And if so many of these automated, boring tasks are swallowed up by AI and you're not able to practice that rote learning and develop those skills of judgment, and then sort of the people skills on top of it, then we're creating a class of junior lawyers, which is, going to be missing that first stage of development. That is where I think the anxiety lies, not necessarily in numbers, but, in 20 years, like what's the law firm partner going to look like in 20 years? The ones who are AI native. Are they going to have those same skills of judgment and care and negotiation that we prize so much now? But yeah, for the numbers, I think it's just hard to tell at the moment. I think all of the fear mongering and these huge headlines that we see talking about specific firms or even making blanket statements, it's unwise because you simply cannot. Not enough firms have implemented all of these tools for long enough to be able to tell what the difference is going to be. I mean, think about how recruitment works in law. It works 2 years in advance, majority of the time. So that gives you a 2-year buffer already. And so I just think it's difficult to tell. And on top of that, so many of these firms are going to be gaining work from all of this AI stuff. Like, there's infrastructure work to be done for all of the data centers. There's loads of new regulation coming out. You need lawyers who are going to be able to work in that. So in some ways, you could even argue that it might create certain jobs. I don't know how true that'll be, but you can't discount it. And, loads of these huge US firms who've had their teeth sunk into the private capital cake for a very long time, they're not going to, their growth shows no sign of stopping at the moment. They're not the ones that are going to be making the cuts. It's going to be the regional firms, you say, the high street firms that do primarily conveyancing work. I don't think if you want to see what the trends are going to be, it's not going to start at the top, at your Kirklands, at your Lathams. It's going to start on the high street. I think that's where the risk lies. I don't know. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's unpredictable. I think that's the thing. I mean, I do think I wouldn't underestimate the capacity of AI to actually create jobs, because I mean, historically, that's kind of what everyone's underestimated with new technologies. They think it's going to wipe everything out and ends up creating a load of stuff that you just can't imagine. People like to kind of be busy.
Yeah.
There's something in human nature about that, about being busy and kind of competing with others. And I suspect it will. I suspect it will end up actually create a few jobs, but we don't really know what they look like. Create more legal work because it allows, I don't know, it allows things to be looked at more micro detail, and that could lead to more legal claims on things. It could lead to a greater level of due diligence on deals. It's very unpredictable. I mean, there's a few sort of people say look at in-house. We should probably have a few words about in-house because
that's true.
Remember, every lawyer that a law firm gets rid of, it's a cost them because they charge their lawyers out by the hour. They're kind of that's what they're selling, people's time. They're not selling like cans of Coke or something. They're selling people's time. Whereas if you're an in-house lawyer at Coca-Cola, the drinks company that owns Coca-Cola, you sell drinks. So legal is a cost to the business. So you would have an in-house legal team, and you would have an incentive to kind of do as much as, well, reduce the headcount in your legal team if you can due to technology, and also kind of keep as much legal work, do it yourselves as possible rather than send it out to expensive law firms. And so probably some of this stuff the received wisdom is some of this stuff will show up first in in-house legal teams because that's where the incentives are. On the other hand, in-house lawyers themselves, do they really have those incentives to get themselves out of a job? And sometimes the career path of in-house lawyers will tend to earn less than in private practice. Some of them still are very healthily remunerated, like the general counsel of the company that owns Coca-Cola will earn a lot of money. But sometimes, I mean, they might not be really pushing these changes. You might look. So then you start thinking, well, it's not big law firms and it's not in-house departments. Where will it come from? And then you think, okay, AI first startup law firms. So again, that's an interesting place to look in the market. Firms that don't always they've got a completely different business model. They don't have a big cost base. Maybe they don't charge people out by the hour. Maybe they sell kind of legal AI bundles or something. Do you know what I mean? So, but all of this, you just don't know how it's going to play out. I wouldn't be, if I was a sort of, in your position, Julie, or someone applying for training, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I was thinking I would give some advice, though, I think, of how, if you're a sort of aspiring lawyer coming into the legal sector, of kind of how you could kind of make yourself as AI proof as possible. And I think the big thing is to focus on connections with people, because if you look at the partners of big law firms, often they're not the best lawyers. They're the ones that have made the best relationships with their clients, so the big companies that they're acting for. And if you are a young lawyer and you start to really focus on those relationships, and that might mean people you already know, you're like, people you went to uni with who work for a big company, because they will get more senior. Might mean going to networking events. It might mean just trying to get exposure to clients on deals. I think that'll stand you in really good stead. It is remarkable if you look at the partners at the top of law firms. They tend not to be the kind of the super brilliant lawyers. They tend to be kind of quite clubbable, kind of schmoozers, maybe a little bit. There's nothing. I mean, it sounds like pejorative. I'm looking for a better word, but
they're just charismatic, aren't they? In a way, they're good at making people feel heard.
They can be. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes, but for whatever reason, they've the ones who've managed to build the relationships. So and then where I think you've got to think, where do you have to be? Where do I need to put myself to build those relationships? And I would say you want to find a big legal center, big commercial center. And if that's in the UK, I do think it's an advantage to be in London. It's where these companies are headquartered, where the money is. In the US, I mean, maybe you need now to head to sort of Silicon Valley, New York. I think sort of location, geography is probably going to become quite important. There's going to be loads of exceptions to this. You get lots of big companies headquartered in different places. There's loads of exceptions to the rule, but I'm just talking about general principles. I think that's the way to do it. And to be honest, that's not a massive change in how to get ahead in a legal career. So it's always been like that to a certain extent. I suppose the other thing is being good with the AI yourself. So you're a good lawyer and you really get legal AI tools. It's probably that's going to be what that's going to become a kind of almost a basic, I think, a kind of essential. But I think a lot of people won't have that at the moment. It's probably quite important, but don't forget the people stuff for sure. So to conclude, it's an uncertain world. There's a lot of confusing mixed messages. Take them all with a bit of a pinch of salt, I think. And focus on the people. Any final thoughts, Julia?
Yeah, just make sure you can do small talk. I think that's my big tip for getting into law. Hold a conversation.
Yeah. Not always that easy. I mean, it's not easier like said than done. I'm not a small talk expert. I have some terrible small talk interactions. I suppose you've just got to keep putting yourself forward and you'll keep talking to people. Yeah, good advice. All right. We will be back next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this video on YouTube, and do similar things if you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by Simpson Thacher, home of the private equity training contract. They're launching in London their new private equity training contract, so check that out.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.